Welcome to the Art of Skill podcast, episode 2. I'm your host, Rick Ellis. Today's guest is Karl Pravec, the Silver Fox, 4th degree black belt under Renzo Gracie. We talk about the benefits of visualization, training Jiu Jitsu in the water, the early days of the Renzo Gracie Academy, being older in BJJ, and more. Stay tuned. The Art of Skill podcast is brought to you by Element Electrolyte Drink Mix. If you're an athlete, you need to be paying attention to your electrolytes for optimum health, performance, and recovery. Element comes in a variety of great flavors. Each packet contains sodium, potassium, magnesium, and no sugar or artificial junk. Just add a packet of Element to your water bottle and you're good to go. We have an exclusive offer for fans of the Art of Skill podcast. Get a sample pack mailed to you for the price of shipping. For more information, visit drinkelement.com/theartofskill. That's drinklmnt.com/theartofskill. Stay salty, my friends. I am so excited for today's guest. This is someone who I've had a huge amount of admiration for a long time because he has some of the most beautiful, elegant jiu-jitsu you can imagine. Mr. Karl Pravec, aka the Silver Fox, is in the house. Hey, Karl.
Hi, Rick. How you doing? Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much, man, for appearing on this fledgling podcast. We're just getting this thing rolling, and you certainly elevate the quality of guests by being with us today. And for those of you out there that don't know who Karl is, first of all, shame on you. You need to go sit in a corner and stare at the wall and repent because you're watching the wrong stuff. So Karl is a 4th degree black belt under Renzo Gracie. And, you know, when I think of beautiful jiu-jitsu, all the superlatives that I can throw out there, elegant, efficient, beautiful transitions, the ability to seize those little windows of opportunity and get yourself in the perfect position. This is a guy that I think of. And Karl, one of the things, not only is that impressive, and it makes me realize that there are truly levels to this game. I'm a black belt, but I think you've been a black belt longer than I've been training, period. So it just shows the depth of this art. But when I look at you, you're not some 215-pound guy with big biceps who's just steamrolling guys. If I saw you at the grocery store, I would think, oh, this guy's probably a CPA, or maybe he's a college professor. And the last thing in the world I would think of is that this guy could strangle me in about 30 seconds. So, that's what's impressive and it shows that jiu-jitsu is such a technical art. There's always technical solutions to physical problems. And when you master those things, it's like magic.
Yeah, it can be. It takes a long time, at least, for me. I'm not a talented guy, that's for sure. But it takes a long time to get good if you don't have talent. But, you got to stay on it and, have the consistency in training. If you have talent, then it's a lot quicker.
Well, but I think you certainly do have talent because the way that you've been able to map the game out in a way that lets you just go to that next thing so efficiently. I mean, there's certainly a talent in that. It can't just be hard work and perseverance, I would think.
I believe it's. It's weird. I think when you train jiu-jitsu for a long time, it kind of rewires your brain and your body to see things in a different way. And I think I had a hard time the first, 10 years or 15 years of training jiu-jitsu. Now it's become easier for me to see those things. But I think, again, it was the training and putting in the time that actually enabled me to start to see things, to see the opportunities, create the openings. See the opening, create it, and then sort of run a a technique through that opening that hopefully results in a submission, or at the very least putting me in a better position. And if that fails, again, it's just utilize the most efficient follow-ups that are there, so that way I can basically my sort of I like to finish a submission as quickly and as efficiently as I possibly can. And that's easier, and these people that don't know a whole lot, but once you have guys that are technical and have strength and have good stamina, it becomes more and more difficult. It becomes sort of a chess game. How quickly can you put somebody in a checkmate position?
Yeah. And, that's the other thing that I admire about your game, is that you are a finisher. You're someone who's always on the hunt, and you're able to insert yourself in those little tiny windows of opportunity. And I'm always talking about, with my students, I talk about windows of opportunity. And when you're new at jiu-jitsu, you need to hold those windows open as long as possible so that you can see those opportunities, because you're always late. But guys that are good, they can seize tiny, tiny windows of opportunity, sometimes even before the window is there. They know it's coming, and they're able to pre-position themselves. And you just exemplify that. So you think it's just mat time, a lot of mat time?
Yeah, it's mat time. And, for me, it's water time too. I don't know if you've seen, I've had a bad back since I was a kid. So periodically it flares up where I can train on the mats as much as I'd like to. So I train every single day, but ideally I'd like to train kind of hard about 3 to 4 days a week on the mats. I'm talking about just training for me to get better, so that I can translate that knowledge to my students. But for me, ideally, I'd like to train hard 3 or 4 days a week and soft the remaining 3 or 4. But the last 2 months, when my back flares up, then I take to the water and do a lot of solo water drills. So now instead I train sort of medium once or twice a week, and then the rest is training in the water. But again, even when I'm training in the water, I'm basically doing solo Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu drills. I'm not using a partner, but I try to visualize things, and I try to see if by the way I perform a specific technique or sequence, I kind of know if I did it right or not, and if I didn't do it right, how my opponent would react, and how I have to react as a response to their reactions. So, and that's additional pressure, because usually as I'm doing these sequences, I wind up underwater. So your breath won't last so long. So I have to finish that sequence, get a submission very quickly before I run out of breath, because I truly hate coming out of the water mid-sequence and just trying to keep that in my head and going back under to try to finish what I started. But I do believe
that's actually brilliant.
It's mat time.
I might actually borrow a couple little video sequences from your channel and superimpose them on this, so people can see.
Feel free,
so people can see what we're talking about. I lived in Hawaii for a year, and the big wave surfers, the way they would train their cardio is they would dive down 15, 20 feet to the seabed and pick up a big rock and just start walking on the seafloor. And so I imagine that doing those sequences in the water, it makes you much more efficient at oxygen utilization, in addition to the technical benefits, the fact that it's no impact, it's good for your joints, it's easy to, to do.
Yeah, it's the hardest part about it is the breathing. You got to breathe out before you go under. Otherwise, you will need a big rock. So if you just go without a big rock, you have to breathe out to engage gravity to some extent, but it's I believe this is the one thing that's keeping me kind of intact. Otherwise, without it, I wouldn't be able to train. I would be training 2-3 times a week, and therefore my game wouldn't be nowhere near as good as it is.
Yeah, I have some low back problems myself, and navigating that. I worked out last night. I went to my little garage gym that I have, and the rest of my body feels great. I can do anything. I can do stuff on the rings. I can do pull-ups. I can do whatever I feel like doing, but my low back kind of limits some of the things I can do. And then, training jiu-jitsu on the mat seems to always aggravate it a little bit. So navigating that is, for us older guys.
I think it's somewhat universal. I know some guys, in the prime of their careers, they had back problems. And once you have those, when it hits, it's sort of like there's not a whole lot you can do. I think if your wrist is bad, you can tape it up. Knee, to some extent, you can put a knee brace up to a certain level. But once with core movement, then becomes difficult. That's why I think where the water training comes in. And I'm a big fan of. I try to. I try to drill things as much as I possibly can, but I'm not as disciplined as I'd like to be when I drill, because a lot of times when we start drilling, the next thing you know, we're rolling. So the hope is if it's my easy or medium day, that rolling doesn't become too intense, because otherwise, I've seen that repeatedly where if I do 3 under normal circumstances when my back's not flared up, if I do 3 or 4 hard days in a week, everything's good. Once I go past that, you really start to break down. So you really have to be much more disciplined and try to have the remaining days more drilling or water training, flow rolling, troubleshooting, whatever. There's different ways to help improve your jiu-jitsu, and rolling is just one of the tools.
Yeah, I read something about visualizing a few years ago where they did this test. They had 2 groups of people. One group was actually doing finger exercises. The other group was visualizing the finger exercises. And it turned out that the group that visualized got, and I forget the percentage now, but it was like 30 or 40% of the benefit, because it turns out to your brain, visualizing something and actually doing it isn't all that different. And so the water training, it's a form of visualization. I imagine that it's pretty useful, probably more than people might realize.
I think it's highly underrated, to be honest with you, because it is, the visualization will help you. And then you actually go through the motion, so you're not just, you're not just getting the muscle memory, both from your brain side, but as well from the muscle itself. You get the resistance, which makes you fast and fluid, pardon the pun. And I think it does the pressure on. I've been doing water training for 20 plus years, and the doctor, I'm actually seeing him tonight, that's been taking care of me for over the last probably decade. He's actually a black belt under Matt Serra, quite good. And he told me, he said, "Karl, your back is really messed up." He said, looking at the MRI. And I said, "Listen, Doc, I really don't want to know the details, because then it's going to be inside my head." But he said, "All right, listen, when you do your water training," I used to do it primarily when I didn't have a training partner or if I got really beat up. He said, "Don't do it in only those times. Do it actually, make it a weekly component of your training." So that I have. So I think it's underrated. I think a lot more people would benefit from it. It is a little tricky. I think it's a little easier once you have some knowledge. It's, if you're white belt or new blue belt, it's kind of hard because you don't have a lot of techniques that you can solo drill, and you don't have enough awareness of necessarily what's a perfect technique that you're trying to emulate.
Yeah.
So when you get to purple belt level, I think it becomes a lot easier. The tricky part is, again, the breathing. People sometimes don't know how to. Usually, if you take a deep breath and you try to do anything, you just got to float on top of the water. You need to breathe out before you start engaging in the sequence, and that allows you to engage gravity to some extent, and then you can sort of start to do your techniques. Like I said, there's a couple of clips on YouTube. Just feel free to take whatever you want from the whole channel. That was the visualization was the other thing. I think I have a YouTube channel, and I really pay attention to it. I've done a lot with Firas Zahabi on the TriStar Gym channel, a lot of the videos, and I didn't really pay attention to it. But one time I'm teaching a seminar in Germany, in Holland, and we're driving on the highway, and I'm talking to a guy in India. He was asking me some technical questions and advice, and I'm talking on Facebook Messenger with him. And the call just kept getting dropped, and I just get frustrated. So I decided, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a monthly program where I'm going to troubleshoot. We do it live. There's some fun things. We try to have fun with it. And sometimes it's unintentional. One time I accidentally put out my uke. He didn't tap, and I just put him out live. So basically, I started doing it monthly. Every Friday, it was every first Friday of the month, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, because it works for a lot of different time zones. And then when lockdown came, here in New Jersey, we were locked down about 3.5 months. So I went to daily. So we did a daily show every single day, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. And we had literally, we still have, literally global audience. The only continent that we don't have any viewers from is Antarctica. Although there was a guy from Poland that was volunteer and tried to indoctrinate the penguins. But so we did daily, and it was kind of funny because as some parts of the world start to open up while we were still doing the daily show, some guys like we got these messages from different countries, Korea, Japan, Canada, and a few other places where people, when they started training, or if they actually went back into some went back to their schools that got subsequently locked down again. Some went into training pods with 1 or 2 people. And some of them, like, we had guys that watched for like 2 or 3 months, nothing else. They didn't do any training. They went back to training, and their teammates said, like, hey, where were you training the last 2 months? Because they actually absorb those techniques visually. So, we've since then I went back to monthly, and then actually the demand was high. So we actually now it's a weekly show now. It's every Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. So
and that's Rolling with the Fox, I think it's called, right?
Sorry?
It's called Rolling with the Fox, I think.
Yeah, it's
right?
Rolling with the Fox. Yeah, it's very easy. Everything is Silver Fox BJJ. If you go to Silver Fox BJJ, the YouTube channel pops up.
Yeah.
Everything.
It's
Go ahead.
I hurt my back and had surgery and had to take a year off. This was years ago. But I kept my head in jiu-jitsu. I watched DVDs. I was just and I decided I was going to make a list with 1,000 techniques. That was my little pet project while I was hurt. And I needed to cross-reference everything, to cross-reference it to DVDs or to whatever, and everything positionally based. Here's closed guard, open guard, whatever. And after a year, I had my list done, and I think when I went back to jiu-jitsu, I had to take it slow because it was just recovering from surgery, but I think I was more technical. And, I think there's just a lot of value in that. Sometimes there can be information overload. People go down too many rabbit holes, and it ends up creating just more of a mess and more confusion. But if you can sort of focus that training to where you're not overwhelming, you're just, you're just adding the things that you want to learn, I think it can be very valuable.
Yeah, I think the visualization is an underrated aspect. I think COVID changed the way people approach training in jiu-jitsu to some extent, where I think the sort of the visual and sort of whether it's YouTube, whether it's actually buying DVDs and instructionals, that it's become a bigger component. I don't think it will ever replace a hands-on teacher, because I think that is the best. Because when I teach seminars, I have like 3 so far DVDs on BJJ Fanatics, and people send me messages on Facebook, hey Fox, I'm having trouble with this. So I tried to troubleshoot it, and it turns out it's on the DVDs. I tell them, I remember I was going back and forth with this guy from New Zealand for a week, and the way he described it, I thought, I actually shot a couple of quick clips to try to troubleshoot it for him. And at the end of the day, he was violating one of the 3 major principles that I outlined pretty much throughout the DVD, that you must keep these in mind, and these always have to be present in order for this to work. And I sort of realized that if he was in front of me, I could have fixed it right then and there. And I agree with you. I think if I can give your listeners a piece of advice, I think if you listen to too many things, too many techniques, it doesn't become a thing of beauty. It becomes a Frankenstein. It's just too many things. There's going to be no cohesiveness between those moves, no sort of connection. I'd encourage people usually, listen, you don't have to listen to me. If my approach to jiu-jitsu is not what what appeals to you, first of all, find a teacher who's first of all game. So in other words, you want to replicate a specific aspects of a game. Is it, if you're a 280 kind of guy that's like slow and deliberate, that you're going to have probably different role models from guy that's 140 pounds. But find a teacher who's game, or a practitioner whose game you want to emulate. and then find a teacher that teaches in a way, number one, that teaches kind of, should be broader and broader style of game, but also whose style of teaching you like. Because if you like their style of teaching, you're going to be paying attention and you're going to be absorbing those things. But again,
that is so important.
So from this, that, and becomes guillotine is like one of my favorite topics. That's one of the DVDs. If you take 10 guillotine experts, you will probably have 10 different approaches, 10 different grips, 10 different tweaks to things. And if you try to emulate all of those, you're going to have nothing. So pick one or two that you think would most resonate with you, and that's the people that you're going to try to follow and emulate their game.
You're absolutely right in that you ask 10 different really good jiu-jitsu guys how to do anything, and they're going to give you 10 variations. And it makes you realize, when you're a white belt or a blue belt, I remember being kind of dogmatic. Oh, no, this is how you finish the omoplata. You have it sort of figured out, or maybe it's the way that your instructor taught it, and that's the correct way. All other ways are wrong. But then you realize eventually that there are no wrong ways. They're just ways that may appeal to you. It works better for you. Something else. I trained with a friend of mine, brown belt, good guy the other day, and he does some things that are a little different than I do from those same positions. I literally never look for the things that he looks for from those positions, and he sort of looks at that position differently than I do, and neither one of us is wrong. It's just a different
different approach to things. Yeah, I think some techniques will work better than others. But, if we choose a very specific submission or a very specific technique, when people are if they don't know, I just say, okay, you do it your way. Here's my way. You try it, and whichever one works better for you. Mine usually works better, but it's up to them to decide. People have very strong feelings about names too. It's amazing. Like, no, this is this. I'm pretty sure there was some Japanese guy that was doing this 200 years ago, but it's not recorded because there was no YouTube back then. And now it's called this because the guy that he knows or that he's heard from first is what it's called. Listen, you can call it whatever you want as long as you can remember the move. I'm okay. I'm a fan of descriptive moves. I'm a big fan of sort of Nogi Ezekiel, but I call it Iron Fist. People call it Diesel Squeezle. You choose whatever you'd like to call it.
Yeah, or the Scorpion versus the Lockdown.
Nogi Ezekiel, Diesel Squeezle, and Iron Fist. I like Iron Fist. So.
That sounds more menacing.
Yes.
So I want to take a little trip down the memory lane to the early days of the Renzo Gracie Academy, because there is a lot of mystique associated with that school. And to my knowledge, and maybe you could correct me, that was really the first big school on the East Coast, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sometime in the mid-90s?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, because...
And you started training pretty early on. What year did you show up at Renzo's?
Well, this was actually even before Renzo's, because what happened is I was training Taekwondo, and my teacher wasn't teaching so much, so I wound up teaching some of the classes, and me and my friends used to go to a lot of different seminars. We'd go to Jeet Kune Do seminars, Muay Thai seminars, and Jeet Kune Do, depending on which disciple of Bruce Lee's they were, they all had different focus, different aspects. Larry Hartzell was doing grappling, and other guys would be doing knife and stick fighting. So we were going to a lot of different seminars, and I wound up, one of my regular training partners from the school gave me a VHS tape, and we wound up going to the first seminar that they did on the East Coast. It was in Parsippany, New Jersey. I believe it was 1991. And there was nobody, to my knowledge, teaching on the East Coast. Maybe there were guys that would go to Torrance and, spend a week or two training and come back and, kick everybody's ass after a week or two training because nobody else knew what was going on. In 92, there was another seminar. In 93, Horian sent Craig Kukuk, who was the first American black belt. Not too many people hear of him, but to teach in New Jersey. And he had a falling out with Horian. And so he teamed up with Renzo to do tapes, videotapes, instructional tapes. And,
I think I have those tapes.
Yeah, I was at that point. I was still primarily interested in stand-up. I would train every Sunday. I would go down to Red Bank, New Jersey, and train, for 2 hours jiu-jitsu, and then go back and do my regular training. And every Sunday I would do that. And then when Renzo started, Renzo would come for a little bit. I believe this was maybe 94. We would come in. They would make the tapes. Renzo would stay for a month, teach some privates, teach some classes, and then go back to Brazil. And I believe in 95, I'm not sure of the specific year, he moved in and they opened up an academy together. And I don't know again the time frame. It didn't last very long. There was a breakup, and Craig Kukuk sort of disappeared, and I've been with Renzo ever since. So it's basically the same school. It just sort of was originally Craig's school, then it was their joint school, and then Renzo's school. I've been that tribe or whatever since the very beginning.
Do you remember what year that was that you first set foot in there?
Well, it was different locations because initially you talked about Kukuk, or when Renzo became sole owner, or because it was different.
Well, I didn't. Yeah,
it was different locations, so it's sort of hard to. Kukuk was subleasing Play 6, and then once the academy was open, it was I want to say 26, 28th Street. Then Renzo moved that academy to 38th Street off 8th Avenue. There was a drug clinic on the second floor. I hated that place because I'm a germaphobe. I don't know how I survived. And then it's been there at the current location. On the current location has been, it's got to be at least 10, 15, maybe more than 15 years. When we switched from the 38th Street to the current location, the Blue Basement, the famed Blue Basement, I almost kissed the ground because that academy was so beautiful and clean and everything. So I was very happy.
Was Renzo teaching most of the classes in those early days?
Yeah, he was teaching, and Renzo Gracie was teaching, Matt Serra was teaching, John Danaher was teaching. So Matt.
So you came up. So you came to talk about some of the people who you came up with, because there's Danaher, there's Sean Williams, there's Matt Serra, there's a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
It sounds like you might have beat all of those guys in starting.
Well, Matt Serra actually started. I was at the time training. Again, this was another place that was subleased in Lower Manhattan, and Matt Serra came in with his two brothers, and they were watching tapes already, and it was like they already had a blue belt. Like, at least they looked amazing.
Yeah.
So I started not that long before Matt Serra, but Matt Serra was like full. I was training, jiu-jitsu at the time. Probably in the mid '90s, I would be training jiu-jitsu maybe 3 or 4 times a week versus stand-up, 3 or 4 times. Now I'm 7 days. I started 1 day a week jiu-jitsu, 6 days stand-up, then 2 days jiu-jitsu, 5 days stand-up, and so forth. But Matt Serra started not that long after me, but he was much deeper immersed into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than I was. Yeah. John started a little bit after me, but not, again, that long. But again, he went pro. He basically, again, became full,
obsessed,
really immersed, whereas I was still training maybe 2, 3, 4 times a week at the time.
What do you remember? So if you go to the psychologist and they show you the Rorschach picture and they say, what is the first thing you think of when you see that word? So with some of those early guys, the names that we all know, the Sean Williams and Dan, when you think back to these guys, give me one or two sentences that you remember back when there were white belts, blue belts coming up. Maybe they were real jovial on the mat. Maybe they were more serious. Maybe.
It's at the time. See, I was working in the city, so I didn't have a chance to hang around, kind of to get to know the guys more on a social basis. I would just basically wanted to get my training in and get out. But Matt Serra is he's always super nice, super loyal guy, very funny, which still comes through today. Sean Williams, I think originally from Iowa, very really, really nice person. John, I remember much more quiet. Well, it's just, I guess people didn't change that much as I'm saying this, I still remember, I remember because at the time we didn't have classes all times of the day. So I would sometimes, get into the city very early. I would go, train with somebody at, we'd get together at 7 a.m., train to 8:15, 8:30, take a shower, run to work. That's back then before there were morning classes until John Danaher and Sean Williams started them. But I remember the guy I was training with, we're roughly, I think at that time, I would say kind of blue belt level, good blue belt, maybe low purple belt. John, same thing. And this guy, Eric. And I would hang with this guy, Eric, and he would pass John's guard. And every time I tried to pass John's guard, he would just put me in half guard, cross collar, choke me. Frustrated the hell out of me. And for years, it just because at the time back then, it was sort of like there was more, the way you pass guard is you just control the hips, kind of more tight passing as opposed to mobile passing, which is my more favorite way to do now. So that's some of the stories. I think, kind of amazes me is, and I think that's a testament to Renzo, is what has happened, the influence that Renzo has had on the world of jiu-jitsu. The guys that actually have kind of come out of the Renzo Academy, and if you look at sort of the guys that are studying under, Ricardo Almeida, Matt Serra, under John Danaher, even guys like Firas Zahabi and those guys, they're kind of, to me, their sister school as well, because they've been coming to train with, at Renzo's for years and years. The practitioners and the sort of the fighters and teachers that Renzo's produced, it's amazing.
Was Renzo always very open-minded about techniques?
Oh, yeah.
Because the old school jiu-jitsu guys, they were very against the leg lock game. They had a very specific view of how you play the game of jiu-jitsu. You have to get past the guard, you lock them down, you get to a dominant position. But you look at the guys coming out of the Renzo Academy, and it's just a very, very diverse field of jiu-jitsu. Was he always open to that?
Yeah, Renzo's an extremely intelligent person, but he cares deeply about people and jiu-jitsu. And he was always open. I still remember to this one day that, John came up, and I don't know if that was the technique that's called the Dars now. I forget exactly what it was, but I remember he was like, Renzo, he's like showing Renzo something, and he's like, Renzo, what do you think about this? He says, oh yeah, it's good, teach it. And I think at the time John was a blue belt. So he already had that mindset back then, and obviously Renzo would always be open to anything that worked. And I think that's one of the many reasons why so many high level guys come out of that environment.
Yeah, I think he's probably my favorite of the Gracies, just because he's so charismatic and such an amazing person. But also, the guy was just fearless. He would go fight anybody, and just that mentality. Not the most physically gifted person in the world. Not he had his limits, but yet he didn't care.
Well, you have to respect that about the man. Anybody, any weight, let's go.
So, who first coined the term silver fox? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember because John told me actually that this guy was taking privates with him to try to thwart the silver fox. And this is probably back, it's got to be maybe 17, 18 years ago, where, I had my hair was always, well, not always, but pretty quickly went gray. And at the time, I was kind of honing my guillotine game, and a lot of times guys would just come in, blast at me like a blast double, or and by the time we hit the floor, they'd be tapping from a guillotine. And they just, I remember, so this guy, I believe the one that coined it the first time, I think is Andrew Johnson. I believe he's a black belt now. But there's guys that are now black belts that, they're my friends now, but I didn't want to train with them anymore. Because it'd be like in a whatever 5-minute period, they'd come in, try to take me down. I hit him with the guillotine. We get up, dust ourselves off, and I was like, man, I don't want to be like hit by like some of these guys that they have decent size. It's repeatedly getting ran by a small car, and the outcome was always the same. It's like, why don't you try something different? If you're going to do this, why don't you try something different? Because I'm getting tired of guillotining you.
We're in a college town, and we get wrestlers at my gym, and they have their patterns. They have their patterns, and you can exploit those patterns. And no matter how much you say, you got to keep your head up, you have to do this, you have to do that. They're locked into their pattern. So.
Yeah.
But how cool is that to have a nickname? I think of myself. I'm like, man, I'd like to have a nickname.
I think it's good because I think it helps you name your school when you do open up a school, because I'm like, okay, what am I going to call it? Oh, all right, it's easy. Versus Karl Pravec Jiu Jitsu.
Especially it branded itself.
My name is. It's spelled kind of, it's KarelPravec, but people they screw it up all the time. It's so fucked.
So you're from Czechoslovakia originally, and then you immigrated to the United States. Were you a teenager, or when did you get to the United States?
The day before my 17th birthday. Moved here.
So, and did you speak English before you showed up?
Yeah, my father taught us, but we were not like comfortable with it. He taught us English, but we were not.
Because you speak pretty standard East Coast English at this point.
So we moved into New York. We lived in the Bronx for a few years. I actually wound up I spent only 1 year in high school here, and then in the Bronx, and then wound up going upstate to college, and then eventually wound up.
What did you study in college?
Economics, and then I worked for 2 years. Then I went for an MBA in Columbia and worked in corporate, and then started to.
So what was it about jiu-jitsu that ultimately captivated you? It's one of those arts that not everybody gets it. Many try, most quit. But to those of us that really get it, it just infects our soul in a way. When I think about jiu-jitsu, I've done many things in my life, and I've done many things at a relatively high level in my life, but I tend to get bored with things whenever I feel like I'm starting to master it. But the thing about jiu-jitsu to me is that it is such a deep art, and it is not just a physical art, it's a cerebral art. It treads this fine line between the physical and the mental, and it just continues to captivate me. When do you remember that moment, or was there a moment when all of a sudden it was a thing for you?
I think it was an evolution, to be honest with you. I think what appeals to me is, there's a couple of things. One is jiu-jitsu is very, like, it literally at Renzo's, you have guys that are like worth a lot of money on the mat, sharing, mats with guys like that are just basically, former drug addicts, spent time in jail and just cleaning themselves up. And I think it's a forgiving art in a sense. It's non-discriminating, where people don't care what your background is. They appreciate if you become good, you will be appreciated. But the other part,
it's a pure meritocracy.
Say it again.
It's a pure meritocracy.
Yes.
Your worth is pure
meritocracy. And what is even better is that even if you are not yet good, and you will become good if you put in the time. Some people, like me, takes longer time than others, but even if you do not yet become good, or you're not quite good, people appreciate the hard work that you're putting in. they can see it and they can appreciate it. And the other thing I appreciate about it is, ultimately, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a problem-solving art. Sport. I don't like to call it sport. I think it's too limiting. I think it truly is an art because I think it allows people different expressions. I hope it never becomes an Olympic sport because I think once it becomes very, very narrow. But it is, you have to solve problems while under duress. And that problem is constantly changing. So it appeals to me on multiple levels.
And you fail more than you succeed in trying to solve those problems.
It can be very frustrating.
As my instructor Roy Dean, he says that failure is just baked into the jiu-jitsu cake. You have to embrace failure, and in doing so, it crushes your ego. But it's so healthy, and it.
Yeah, that's a good saying. I think if you you can take it in a lot of different directions. You can just, it's an amazing hobby. It gives your brain a break from everything else going in your life for that 1 hour, if that's all you need. Some people that, 3 hours a week, you know what, those 3 hours are amazing because when you come out of there, a lot of the issues, whether it's at work or whatever issues you might be facing, going to be a lot easier for you to deal with and a lot easier for people, for you to solve problems at work or figure out how you should approach a job, a contract, or whatever it is. You could be a hobbyist, you could be a deep hobbyist, you could be a semi-pro, which is, I call people that they kind of like sort of getting good, they might want to teach, they sort of go down that path. You could be a competitor, you could be an athlete, and you could be a teacher, which gives you an opportunity to impact a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, it's such a deep art.
Yeah.
It can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
It can truly be whatever you want it to be. So is there one person you think was your greatest influence in jiu-jitsu? Would it be Renzo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a lot of different people influence me, specifically at each belt. It was always somebody that had like a little bit of had to do with me kind of getting from that belt to the next. It's not just the belt thing, but just sort of helping my game, helping me mentally approach jiu-jitsu. But Renzo has been there pretty much from, like I said, from the beginning.
What do you think the belts mean? If someone asks you, what do the belts in jiu-jitsu mean? White belt, blue belt, purple. As a coach, what do you look for at each level?
It depends on the individual, because I think people, sometimes say belts don't matter. Well, if they don't matter, why do we have them? Others say, well, they're just too wedded to the belt, not enough to the knowledge and the process. And I think they do matter. They're an important acknowledgement, especially at the early stages of people's progress. I think that every belt has its level. It's a range. There are black belts and there are black belts. There are brown belts and there are brown belts. There are blue belts and there are blue belts. Right. Sometimes people just think like, well, how could this person be a blue? You just got people, or how could this? Listen, there are world-class elite purple belts that compete that will probably beat most decent black belts. The point is, do they have wisdom? Do they have understanding of not just the techniques they're doing, that they're their specialty, but other things in jiu-jitsu that would be a good teacher. They might add, if they teach seminar, they might help somebody understand that specific specialty that they have. But again, the belts are subjective. At the end of the day, it's a teacher's sort of understanding. Okay, this guy, for this person, he's a blue belt. I believe you need to judge that within sort of how do you see that individual. If there's a guy that puts in 2-3 years of steady work, and he just can't get it, but he's not, maybe not, he's probably the most not gifted person, and somehow perseveres. You know, that guy deserves a blue belt. I'm sure he knows enough to be a blue belt.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, I had a young guy come to me a few years ago, and he was a very physically gifted teenager who, he was just a nightmare from day one. He was giving people a hard time on the mat. And one day he came to me and he said, I'm kicking everybody's butt here. What does it take to get a blue belt here? And I told him, I said, it's like in the Bible, he to whom much is given, much is expected. And, you know, so you might judge a good, strong athlete like that a little differently because they have more to give. They're not having to work as hard as the guy who's 38 and has a family, and he's doing the work too, but he's got a bum hip, and you know, it's just harder for that guy. And so you can't always have this perfect metric that defines what that guy, whether that guy's a blue belt or he's a blue belt. It's a feel thing as an instructor. You're like, man, he's put in the time. He's doing the best he can. He's got some limits. There's a ceiling here, but he's doing the most with what he has versus this young, strong athlete. He's not doing the most with what he has. He needs to do more.
Yep. And you need to have, at least for a blue belt, to me, you got to have a decent understanding of what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you're a wrestler, you can take people down and kind of crank their arm and they tap, but you don't know what a triangle is. You don't know, so the basic positions. You don't know how to, you just explode out of being mounted because you're so athletically gifted, but you don't know, some basic escapes from bottom side control. Then again, it's a progression. It's like a degree. I would liken it to somebody. If somebody was homeschooled, and were extremely intelligent, and they went to Harvard, and basically are smarter than the people in that class right now, would Harvard give them the diploma right then and there, or would they make them still go through some process? I believe it's the latter. I believe it's, you got to go through some process. I have good wrestlers. They'll get to blue belt a lot quicker than your average, even athletic human. But still, you got to go through the process at least, maybe on an accelerated basis.
Yeah. So let's switch gears. I don't want to keep you too long today, but let's switch gears and talk about the older grappler. For better or worse, my channel is attracting the older guys, and I don't get it. I don't see why they'd be attracted to my stuff. But you're not too young anymore. I mean, we're both getting up there, and yet we're both still doing this. I have empathy for the new people that are starting jiu-jitsu at a more advanced age. I have a ton of empathy for those guys because, at least for you or me, we have enough technical solutions that we don't have to work quite as hard. Whereas these people who are just starting, they just don't have the technical solutions, and they don't have the physical solutions either. And so they're just going to end up spending a lot of time tapping, a lot of time in disadvantaged positions. And that's a frustrating road when you're older, because you need a fairly large technical gap to overcome somebody who has way better attributes than you. So what do you tell the older guys? I'm sure you've got plenty of old guys that train with you. And
well, one thing that I would like to also point out, they don't have the rank also. For me, if somebody wants to train with me and I'm injured, I'm going to say no. If they insist, I will make them scream. Because then I know you have no interest in learning. You basically just want to see what you could do. Then I consider it a fun. And I've done that. It doesn't happen that often, but it has happened historically where guys were like, no, come on, we go easy. And the next thing you know, I get elbowed in the head. I will make them scream. So my advice to the guys is, guys, don't feel bad to say no, that you have a rough day. Just, listen. At the end of the day, don't let anybody bully you into Okay, just say, listen, I just came to drill today. That's it. Okay? So basically, I think the most important things are good partners for older guys. You know, I'm not necessarily a fan. I know there's sometimes people think like, let's put a bunch of older guys together and train. I'm not necessarily sure that that's a great idea, especially if it involves like normal rolling and people don't know each other. Some guys tend to compensate for lack of technique with a lot of strength, and that's when things can sort of start to snap. Usually, the best trading partners for some of the older guys is what I would call sturdy blue, purple belt guys that are kind of bigger, stronger. They can take a little bit of abuse because the guy's not going to move smoothly. You know, he may accidentally elbow him in the head. It's not, but you want a guy with a good personality that doesn't take offense and say, okay, you know, oh shit, I'm going after you now. So you need a good training partner that kind of has an understanding what this guy's going through, and help him get to a point where he can sort of start to use more technique and becomes smoother, you know, more technical grappler. So I think that's the best way to address it. I try to put people, like I said, with younger, sturdier guys that can take unintended abuse and help them polish it up. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, it's tough, you know, when you don't have the technical solutions yet, and you don't have the gas tank, you don't have the attributes. I'm in a college town, and you know, it's almost comical. Most of my students are in their 20s, and then there's me. And you mentioned the big guy that comes in that tries to take your head off. You know, we get those guys too sometimes. They walk in the door, they've been a competitive athlete their whole life. They just want to test themselves. They just want to walk in so they can, you know, maybe walk out of the gym saying, yeah, I kicked those guys' butts, or I, you know, whatever. And, you know, usually I'm pretty mellow, but sometimes you have to take it to those guys because they need to feel it. They need to feel the power of jiu-jitsu. And I remember one kid in particular. You said you make people, you know, scream or whatever. This one kid, you know, I almost never lose my cool on the mat. Almost never. It's rarely happened. But this kid was just, you know, and I had a talk with him before we started because I could tell he was just built like an ox, just one of these guys, rugby player. And I gave him the speech. Listen, you know, you got to just dial it back. And he was just grabbing at limbs, being dangerous, just ripping at stuff. And so I rolled with him, and he was trying to just tear things off my body. And I slapped on a triangle, and I held it way too long. I almost put him to sleep. And then I kicked him out of the gym after that. I said, listen, this place isn't for you. So you do get those guys. Fortunately, most people are pretty chill, and those are the exceptions.
It's rare now.
What do you think is the hardest part of jiu-jitsu to learn? What is maybe the biggest stumbling block for new people coming in and trying to learn it?
Understand that it's a process. That no matter how much time you put in the next 6 weeks, you will not be a world champion. I think a lot of times people come in and they think that I'm going to spend 6 hours a day here for the 4 weeks, and they're not much better than a guy that just comes 3 times a week for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what's going on here? It's a highly technical martial art. There is a lot to it. Takes time to, you never really master it, but takes time to get good at it. And you need to go through that process. And you have to believe that if you have a good teacher, that eventually the things that are not, your body's not moving the way you want it to move, that eventually it will. For some it's faster than others, but it will take time for everybody.
Yeah, I always say that jiu-jitsu is fundamentally just a movement art. It's just about moving ourselves, and usually it's about moving ourselves, not our opponent. Yep. Beginners are all. In fact, I had a conversation with this guy. He was a blue belt that came and visited our gym the other day, and he asked me for my advice to him, and he was a big, strong athlete. And I said, most of your energy right now is externally focused. I want you to start thinking about focusing your energy internally to help you move yourself efficiently in and out of danger, rather than focusing it on it externally. So it is a movement art, and it's one of those, moving in 3 dimensions on the mat is complicated. We don't, and most people in their daily life, they're just in a vertical orientation. There's no friction, and you put them on a mat and it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, they're moving in either 1 dimension or 2 dimensions, not in 3. Right. Yeah, I think I especially appreciate the bigger guys that come in, and I try to encourage them to play guard, play the bottom. So there's nothing more dangerous than a big guy, big, strong, athletic guy that has a good guard. Because he's going to have a good top side as well, because every time he's not afraid to wind up on the bottom. He will take chances. He's going to be, he's going to be hunting for submissions.
Yeah. So, Karl, one last question here. What is one thing that people might be surprised to know about you? I mean, do you have some unique hobbies, or is there anything that maybe the world doesn't know about Karl?
I'm like in the out.
Are you a competitive ballroom dancer?
I'm a German. Once I take a shower, I'm like this. It's funny because once I come out, like on the mats, I'm okay. I'll with the sweat and everything, but once I'm taking a shower, the only people I will, like, if somebody, like, if it's a brand new guy, just first day at the school, and he goes to shake my hand, I will do it, and then I'm gonna run to the bathroom, wash my hands, but once they've been with me, I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, I took a shower for a reason. If I wanted to have sweat all over me, or if they want to give me a hug, if I wanted to have sweat all over me, I wouldn't have taken a shower. So that's
it's funny you mentioned that, because some people say I look a little like Howie Mandel, and he is a massive germaphobe. he's known for just wearing rubber gloves when he's out.
Yeah, I'm not that bad, but not far off. I think the person that I think people tell me I look the most is I think Patrick Stewart.
Oh, a little bit, yeah. A little bit.
But
so where can people find you? Obviously, Silver Fox on YouTube. Is there anywhere else that you lurk?
Everything is very easy to find. If you want to get any of the BJJ Fanatic stuff, you could just put Fox. You don't have to pull Silver Fox. You could put just Fox. And the armbar DVD, guillotine DVD, triangles from like literally every possible position you could think of. I'm working on another one right now. So everything is under Silver Fox. So if you need to find me, you can on Facebook. My profile is Silver Fox. The academies are Silver Fox BJJ. SilverFoxBJJ.com is the academy website. So everything is on, and the YouTube channel is Silver Fox BJJ. So it's easy. Everything is under Silver Fox.
And the BJJ Globetrotters guys just put your video. You were in Iceland last week teaching, and they just put that video up there.
Just
it was called Inverted and Ugly Triangles.
Yeah, that's probably 20 minutes of instruction versus the DVD that's on Fanatics, which is at least 3 hours of solid instruction. So just goes to show you
I actually love that because
I'm sorry.
I actually I was watching that, and I had this epiphany, because when guys are trying to pressure past me, sort of drive forward, a lot of times I'll just capture the arm and I'll grab the belt and I'll tuck under and I'll roll them. I call it the harpoon, and I'll just end up on top. And I do that all the time. But you like to set up an inverted triangle from there. And I was thinking, I am in this position all the time, and yet I literally have never thought to do the triangle from there. So I'm going to start playing with that myself.
There's two versions of that. Yeah. So it's because the class was only an hour, so in an hour of a class, you probably instruct 20 minutes, and 40 minutes people go through but it gives you maybe a little bit of preview of some of my thoughts on triangling people.
Yeah. Highly recommended. You're on my bucket list, my friend, of someone that I would like to roll with and just feel humiliated by you because you're so technical and so good.
Come visit us.
I will. I'll have to take a road trip one of these days and maybe grab my camera and just go visit all the guys that I'd like to train with.
Sounds like a good
So thank you so much, Karl. It was great to finally meet you, and you're a pretty nice guy. Who knew?
It's my pleasure. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Yeah, that's the other thing about me. It takes me. I started to play around with this about 15, 20 minutes before. It still couldn't get it started on time because I couldn't.
No, I think we did good. So I appreciate it, and I encourage all my listeners to go seek you out and go subscribe to his channel. He's got some great stuff there, and it's so humbling to watch. I'm going to steal a couple clips just to show people the beauty of your game.
Take whatever you need.
So, all right, I appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care.
Bye.